Around 1200 BC, a few tribal families were traveling deep through the forests of Belize. They were looking for a place where they could settle and start a new life. They kept moving through the forest until they came across a hilly region surrounded by dense rainforest. After spending some time exploring the area, they decided this was where they would settle. And that's how the first small community began. The family started farming the land and soon began trading with nearby settlements. As they traded with more people, others heard about the settlement, and little by little, more families started moving there. The small community slowly grew into a village where everyone knew each other. During the day, they worked in the fields, and when the work was over, the whole village came together to eat, celebrate, and spend time with one another. As the years went by, the village kept growing as more and more families made it their home. Nobody living there could have imagined that the small settlement they were building would one day become the great Maya kingdom of Caracol. Over the next few centuries, the small village grew into a town. During that time, two more communities settled on the nearby hills. They traded with Caracol and came together for ceremonies. One of those communities was called Tikal, where the biggest ceremonies were held. People from Caracol and the nearby settlement of Kahal Pachik would gather there to take part. For hundreds of years, the three communities lived peacefully. But while life around Caracol stayed much the same, the Maya world was beginning to change. For centuries, the Maya world had been ruled by one great kingdom, El Mirador. It was a city of huge pyramids where thousands of people lived. Some of those pyramids rose more than 70 meters into the sky. The largest pyramid in the city, known today as La Danta, contained even more stones than the Great Pyramid of Giza. For generations, El Mirador remained the richest and most powerful city in the Maya world. But by the 1st century AD, El Mirador was dying. The cities that had once lived under the shadow of El Mirador were now rising to become the next great Maya kingdoms. Many of them were going to war with one another for power and control. The leaders of Caracol, Tikal, and Kahal Pachik could see what was happening around them. They knew they would be stronger together than apart, so they decided to unite and become one kingdom. They called their new city Uxwitsa, which means three hills. Today we know that city as Caracol. After the fall of El Mirador, the Maya world began to change. New kingdoms were rising across the region, and every king wanted his city to become the next great power. Some built strong alliances, others went to war. One by one, the smaller cities began falling under the influence of the larger kingdoms, and Caracol was one of them. By this time, Tikal had become the strongest kingdom in the region. Caracol lived under its influence, and it was in this world that a man named Tikal Chak came to power. In AD 331, he became the first recorded king of Caracol and founded the royal dynasty that would rule the kingdom. When Tikal Chak became the first king of Caracol, he stepped into a Maya world where the great kingdoms had already made the rules. They controlled the trade that passed from one city to another. They decided which kingdoms became allies and which became enemies. And wherever their influence reached, the smaller kingdoms had little choice but to follow. That was how the Maya world worked. Caracol was still a young kingdom, and Tikal Chak knew it could not fight Tikal. Rather than challenging the great kingdoms, he chose to remain on good terms with them. Instead of fighting wars, he spent those years building Caracol. For decades, things stayed that way. Then, a new rival emerged. It was a kingdom to the north called Calakmul. At first, Calakmul was just another powerful Maya city, but with every passing generation, it grew larger, richer, and more ambitious. Instead of building its power through conquest, its ruler began pulling more and more kingdoms into their alliance. Some joined willingly, others had little choice. The Maya world was no longer dominated by one great kingdom. It was now divided between two. For the first time in centuries, Tikal had a rival powerful enough to challenge its rule. And caught between those two powerful kingdoms was Caracol. By the middle of the 6th century, the balance of power was beginning to change. Tikal's king, Wakchan Kavil, better known today as Doublebird, was determined to keep Tikal as the greatest kingdom in the Maya world. As Calakmul's influence spread, kingdoms across the lowlands were forced to choose a side. Remaining neutral was no longer an option. Then, in AD 553, a new ruler came to the throne of Caracol. His name was Lord Water, also known as Yahweh the Kinich II. Like the kings before him, he had grown up under Tikal's influence, but the Maya world he had inherited was very different from the one Tikal Chak had known. Tikal was no longer the only great power, and for the first time in 2 centuries, Caracol had another path. By now, Caracol had become far more than a small kingdom. For Tikal, it was one of the most important allies, keeping its influence alive across the southern Maya lowlands. Losing Caracol wouldn't just mean losing a single city. It would encourage every other kingdom to question Tikal's authority and weaken the network of alliances it had spent generations building. And if Caracol ever switched sides, it would open the door for Tikal's greatest rival to push deeper into its own territory. In AD 556, Tikal made the first move. Wakchan Kavil, along with its armies, marched into Caracol and defeated the young kingdom. Tikal had made its point, break away, and this is what follows. But the victory didn't end the conflict, it changed it. Lord Water knew Caracol could never defeat Tikal alone. If his kingdom was ever going to break free, it would need an ally just as powerful as its enemy. And there was only one kingdom capable of standing against Tikal. Far to the north, Calakmul had been watching everything. Its rulers had spent decades bringing alliances, expanding their influence, and waiting for the right moment to challenge Tikal's dominance. Caracol's defeat gave them exactly the opportunity they had been waiting for. 3 years had passed since Tikal defeated Caracol. On the surface, it looked as though nothing had changed. Tikal was still the greatest kingdom in the Maya world, and King Wakchan Kavil believed Caracol had learned its lesson. But behind the scenes, a very different story was unfolding. While Tikal celebrated its victory, Lord Water was quietly building a new alliance. He sent messengers north to Calakmul. Then, in AD 562, Lord Water made his move. He declared war on Tikal and attacked its territory. The Maya inscriptions simply call it a star war. In response, King Wakchan Kavil marched into battle, expecting another victory. For generations, no kingdom had been able to break Tikal's power, and there was little reason to believe this battle would be any different. But when the armies met, Caracol was no longer standing alone. Fighting beside it was Calakmul. For Tikal, it was a battle unlike anything it had faced before. Two of the fastest rising kingdoms in the Maya world had united against a single enemy, and this time the result was completely different. The battle that followed would shake the entire Maya world. When it was finally over, the impossible had happened. Tikal was defeated, and Caracol had won. The news did not stay on the battlefield for long. It traveled from one kingdom to another until every Maya ruler knew what had happened. A city that had spent 2 centuries living under Tikal's shadow had just brought it to its knees. Lord Water had won far more than a battle. The years that followed brought new allies, more trade, and more wealth. And as Caracol grew stronger, the city itself began to change. Smaller kingdoms began making alliances with its rulers, while others paid tribute to remain under its protection. Its influence continued to spread across the Mayan lowlands, and with every passing generation, its army, wealth, and political power continued to grow. That prosperity transformed the city itself. Larger palaces were built for its kings. New temples rose above the rainforest, and monuments were carved to celebrate their victories. By the 7th century, more than 100,000 people lived in Caracol, more than in most cities in medieval Europe at the time. Caracol had become one of the largest cities in the ancient America. For over a century, Caracol had no rival powerful enough to challenge it. But kingdoms don't stay at the top forever. Far to the west, Tikal was rebuilding. The defeat of AD 562 had not ended its story. Every new king inherited the same goal: to restore Tikal's lost power and erase the humiliation suffered by their ancestors. They knew marching straight into Caracol would be a mistake. As long as Calakmul stood beside Caracol, Tikal couldn't win. So Tikal didn't march on Caracol, it marched on Calakmul. In AD 695, Tikal defeated Calakmul, ending more than a century of rivalry between the two great superpowers. Calakmul never recovered, and Caracol suddenly found itself without the ally that had stood beside it since the Star War. For the first time since 562 AD, Caracol stood alone. Tikal had removed the greatest obstacle in its path. Then, in AD 743, Tikal attacked and defeated El Peru, one of Calakmul's remaining allies. The following year, it marched against Naranjo, defeated its king, and carried away the city's sacred patron god. To the Maya, capturing a city's patron god was a message to every other kingdom: your king had been defeated, and so had the god who was supposed to protect him. This was the greatest humiliation a kingdom could suffer in Maya world. One by one, the kingdoms that had once supported Calakmul were falling under Tikal's control. As those allies disappeared, Caracol found itself increasingly alone. The flow of tribute slowed, making it harder for its rulers to hold the kingdom together and maintain the city. The city did not disappear overnight. As the years passed, more and more people simply left. It started in the farming communities beyond the city. Then, the neighborhoods inside Caracol slowly began to empty. As more people left, the market slowly emptied. Without enough people to maintain them, the temples began to fall into disrepair. The roads that had once connected Caracol to the rest of the Maya world were gradually reclaimed by the forest. By AD 900, Caracol was empty. A city that had taken more than 2,000 years to build had vanished in just 2 centuries. After the last people left, the rainforest slowly reclaimed the city. Century after century, Caracol remained hidden beneath the trees, until, more than 1,000 years later, someone found it again. In 1937, a Belizean logger named Rosa Mai was searching for mahogany in the rainforests of Belize. He kept going deeper into the forest, hoping to find better timber. But as he made his way through the woods, he suddenly stumbled upon a giant pyramid standing in the middle of the rainforest. He walked toward the pyramid to see what it was. As he got closer, he noticed a few more stone structures hidden beneath the trees. He walked around the area for a while, and soon he started coming across massive stone monuments and carved stelae. That's when he realized he wasn't looking at just another ruin. He had found an ancient city. He quickly made his way back and went straight to the government offices in Belize City to tell them about the ancient site he had found. Soon, a team of archaeologists arrived at the site and began examining the city. Over the next several decades, they continued examining the site. As more of the city came to light, they found that this wasn't just another Maya city. It was Caracol, one of the greatest Maya kingdoms ever built.